June 25, 2009. At 12:21 p.m., a 911 call comes in. Michael Jackson isn't breathing. Minutes later, reporters gather at the gates of his home. Cameras roll. News anchors cut into live broadcasts. At 2:26 p.m., doctors announce Michael Jackson is dead. He was 50. The world erupts. Websites crash under the weight of traffic. Twitter records an unprecedented surge of messages. Google mistakes the flood of searches for an attack. So many people are typing the same name, Michael Jackson. Across the globe, people pour into the streets. Classes stop. Stores close. Crowds huddle around television screens. In Tokyo, thousands hold candles. In Paris, fans moonwalk in the square. In Brazil, people kiss their vinyl records. Within hours, his death becomes the most discussed news event in human history. How did a boy from Gary, Indiana become the man whose death stopped the planet? Childhood. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1958, in Gary, Indiana, into a poor working-class family. He was the seventh of 9 children, raised in a cramped 2-bedroom house where 3 kids often shared a single bed. His father, Joseph Joe Jackson, worked as a crane operator at the steel mill. A failed musician, Joe carried his own frustration like a weapon. If he couldn't make it in music, his children would, and he forced them there. Joe ruled with fear. Rehearsals stretched for hours. Mistakes punished with a belt or an electrical cord. Michael wrote in Moonwalk, "When he came into the room, I would sometimes throw up from fear. I loved him, but I was terrified of him." One night left a permanent scar. Joe climbed through Michael's bedroom window wearing a grotesque mask, screaming to terrify the children into keeping windows shut. Michael never forgot it. For years, he had nightmares about being kidnapped from his bed. Joe never allowed the children to call him Dad. He demanded they address him only as Joseph. His mother, Catherine, was gentle, religious, and a devout Jehovah's Witness. She raised her children in strict faith. No birthdays, no Christmas, no holidays. Joy was rationed. Discipline was constant. She offered comfort but rarely intervened when Joe's punishments went too far. Even among his siblings, Michael often felt alone. His brothers teased him for his high-pitched voice, mocked the size of his nose, and belittled his sensitivity. Biographers later connected these taunts to the roots of his dysmorphobia, the body image obsession that drove his later surgeries and insecurities. At just 5 years old, Michael stepped on stage for the first time. By 6, he was performing with his brothers in local clubs. Childhood games disappeared. Rehearsals and stage shows took their place. Inside the Jackson home, love was conditional. On stage, it was unconditional. When strangers screamed his name, Michael finally felt what he didn't at home: pure love. The stage became his family, his refuge, and eventually his prison. The rise of the Jackson 5. By the late 1960s, Joe Jackson had turned his sons into a machine. Under the name the Jackson 5, they hustled through talent shows, school auditoriums, even strip clubs across the Midwest. Michael was only 6, but he was already the frontman. Audiences were stunned. This tiny boy sang James Brown with uncanny maturity, mimicking his moves with razor-sharp precision. One talent scout remembered, "It was like an old soul trapped in a child's body." In 1968, the Jackson 5 signed with Motown Records. Berry Gordy saw it instantly. Michael wasn't just part of the group, he was the group. A year later, at just 11, he led their debut single, "I Want You Back," to number 1. Then came ABC, "The Love You Save," and "I'll Be There." 4 consecutive number 1s, an unprecedented run. America was obsessed. The Jackson 5 were on lunchboxes, dolls, even their own Saturday morning cartoon. But the spotlight burned brightest on Michael. Fans screamed his name. Cameras fixed on his face. Producers demanded his voice on every track. Inside the family, it bred tension. Jermaine, once the leader, struggled with jealousy. The brothers teased Michael, mocking his high voice and his nose. For Michael, the message was clear. The only place he was truly loved was in front of strangers. And Motown offered no freedom. Every song, every costume, every interview was scripted. Michael later said he felt like a product on a conveyor belt. By the early 1970s, he wasn't just a child star. He was a national phenomenon, selling more records than Elvis or the Beatles at their peak. But he was also a boy with no childhood, raised on fear, jealousy, and corporate control. The louder the world adored him, the colder his family dynamic became. By the Victory Tour in 1984, Michael was traveling separately, staying in private suites, and finally told the world this would be his last tour with his brothers. The fracture had started years earlier in that small house in Gary, born of Joe Jackson's iron hand and his son's resentment, and it would haunt Michael for the rest of his life. Off the Wall and the birth of a solo star. By the late 1970s, Michael Jackson was no newcomer. At just 20, he had spent more than half his life rehearsing, recording, and performing. But inside, he carried a frustration. The world still saw him as the boy wonder from Gary, Indiana, not as a serious artist. That chance came through Hollywood. In 1978, Michael played the Scarecrow in The Wiz, a Motown reimagining of The Wizard of Oz. The film flopped, but it changed his life. On set, he met producer Quincy Jones. Quincy saw what others had missed. Michael was ready to step out of his family's shadow and create something entirely his own. Together, they crafted Off the Wall, released in August 1979, a vibrant fusion of pop, funk, disco, and soul. Michael's falsetto soared on Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, and his warmth glowed on Rock With You. For the first time, he wasn't just the voice. He was co-writer, co-producer, and the creative force driving the sound. The album sold over 20 million copies worldwide, making Michael the first solo artist with 4 top 10 singles from one record. Critics called it a breakthrough, proof that he had successfully reinvented himself as an adult star. And yet, at the 1980 Grammys, Off the Wall won only one award, Best R&B Vocal Performance. Album of the Year went elsewhere. Michael was heartbroken. "I cried that night. I felt ignored," he later admitted. That moment of pain became fuel. Michael vowed that his next album wouldn't just be successful. It would be undeniable. It would be the biggest record anyone had ever seen. That vow became Thriller. Thriller, The Moonwalk, and the birth of an icon. In November 1982, Michael Jackson released Thriller, the album that would define a generation. The singles were unstoppable. Billie Jean was the first video by a black artist played in heavy rotation on MTV. It broke the color barrier in a way nothing else had. Beat It, with Eddie Van Halen's blistering guitar solo, fused rock and R&B like never before. And the 14-minute short film Thriller, directed by John Landis, turned a music video into cinema. Michael wasn't just topping charts, he was rewriting the rules of pop culture. And then came the moment that froze the world. In 1983, during Motown's 25th anniversary special, he performed Billie Jean and unveiled the Moonwalk. The move wasn't new. Street dancers in Los Angeles called it the backslide. Artists like Cab Calloway and James Brown had glided decades earlier. Even Jeffrey Daniel of Shalimar had performed it on TV. But Michael perfected it. He smoothed it, slowed it, and paired it with his still upper body, fedora, and spotlight. The illusion was complete. He looked as if he was walking forward while sliding backward, defying gravity. The world called it the Moonwalk. Fred Astaire phoned Michael after that performance and said, "You're a hell of a mover." At the same time, Michael's image was crystallizing. The white glove, sparkling with rhinestones, became his ultimate symbol. Some say it hid the first patches of vitiligo on his hand. Others argue it was pure theater, a single point of focus for the audience. Michael himself brushed it off with a smile. One glove looks cooler than two. By 1984, Thriller had sold over 66 million copies worldwide. At the Grammys, Michael won a record 8 awards, including Album of the Year. Elizabeth Taylor crowned him the king of pop. But even as he wore the crown, Michael confessed, success brings loneliness. People think you're invincible, but inside you're still human. But Michael wasn't content with just ruling the stage. He wanted to rule the business. In the early 1980s, Michael grew close with Paul McCartney. Together, they recorded Say, Say, Say and The Girl Is Mine. Offstage, Paul shared advice. The real money is in publishing, owning songs. Michael listened. In 1985, he stunned the world by purchasing ATV Music Publishing, which included the rights to more than 250 Beatles songs for $47.5 million. For Michael, it was a brilliant move. For McCartney, it was a betrayal. Their friendship ended, and the press painted Michael as ruthless. But for Michael, it was proof. He wasn't just the king of pop. He was learning to be king of the industry. Fire, fantasy, and the first fall. At the height of his fame in 1984, Michael Jackson seemed untouchable. Thriller had made him the biggest star in the world. But then came a moment that reminded everyone, and Michael himself, that he was still human. During the filming of a Pepsi commercial, a spark from the pyrotechnics lit his hair on fire. Cameras kept rolling as Michael, lost in the rhythm, kept dancing until stagehands rushed to smother the flames. He suffered second-degree burns to his scalp. The accident left scars deeper than the ones on his skin. To cope with the pain, doctors prescribed powerful painkillers. For Michael, they offered relief, and a dangerous new dependency that would shadow him for the rest of his life. As he healed, the world noticed something else. Michael was changing. His nose looked sharper, his skin lighter. Rumors of endless surgeries filled tabloids. The more his fame grew, the more his appearance became an obsession for the press. In 1993, he sat down with Oprah Winfrey and gave an answer the world didn't expect. He had vitiligo, a condition that destroys pigmentation. He admitted to 2 nose surgeries, but denied the rumors of dozens more. Still, the questions never stopped. For a man teased since childhood about his looks, the scrutiny cut deep. To escape, Michael built his dream world. In 1988, he purchased a ranch in California and transformed it into Neverland. With its amusement rides, zoo, and movie theater, it was less a home and more a personal Disneyland. For Michael, it wasn't extravagance, it was survival. "I never had a childhood," he once said. "Neverland is my way of living it now." But what was magic for him looked strange to others. The same place that was meant to heal him soon became a magnet for suspicion. Tabloids called it bizarre, unsettling. Whispers began to spread, whispers that would grow louder with time. Even as the gossip swirled, Michael pushed the boundaries of what was possible on stage. In 1987, in the video for Smooth Criminal, he stunned audiences with his now famous anti-gravity lean. With bodies bent forward at 45 degrees, as if gravity had been switched off, Michael once again turned dance into an illusion. In film, it was a harness trick, but for live shows, he went further, patenting special shoes that locked into the stage floor, using engineering and his extraordinary strength to perform the impossible. But no illusion could protect him from what came next. In 1993, 13-year-old Jordan Chandler accused Michael of molestation. The same cameras that once worshipped him now swarmed his home, broadcasting police raids at Neverland. Helicopters hovered, tabloids speculated, and every detail of his private life became public property. Michael denied the allegations, but under crushing pressure, his team chose settlement, a reported $23 million to the Chandler family. There was no trial, no conviction, but in the court of public opinion, the damage was done. For the first time, the man who had moonwalked across the world's stage, who leaned past gravity itself, found his image collapsing under the weight of suspicion. His crown was still there, but no longer shone the same way. History, love, and the trial of the century. The 1993 scandal left Michael shaken. The accusations never went to trial, but the damage was done. For the first time in his career, his image no longer felt untouchable. He chose to answer not with interviews, but with music. In 1995, he released his story, Past, Present, and Future Book 1. Half greatest hits, half manifesto. On new tracks like Scream with his sister Janet, he lashed out at the press. In They Don't Care About Us, he turned pain into protest, railing against injustice and persecution. The album sold over 20 million copies. Critics called it defensive, fans called it cathartic, but pressure didn't come from the media alone. In 1993, his own sister, LaToya Jackson, held a press conference in Europe where she said she believed the allegations against him and claimed to have evidence. For the public, it was shocking. For the first time, accusations weren't just tabloid headlines, they came from family. Years later, LaToya recanted, admitting she had been manipulated by her then husband and manager. But in the moment, her words cut deep. Michael wasn't just fighting the press, he was fighting his own blood. Meanwhile, his personal life became a spectacle of its own. In 1994, he married Lisa Marie Presley, daughter of Elvis. For tabloids, it was a fairy tale pairing, the King of Rock's daughter and the King of Pop. Their kiss at the MTV Video Music Awards made global headlines. But behind the cameras, the marriage was fragile. Within 2 years, it ended. In 1996, Michael married again, this time to Debbie Rowe, a nurse who had worked for his dermatologist. Together, they had 2 children, Prince and Paris. The marriage ended in 1999, but Michael retained custody. In 2002, his third child, Prince Michael II, nicknamed Blanket, later known as BG, was born via surrogate. For all his eccentricities, fatherhood became Michael's anchor. He often said his children were the only pure joy in his life. Yet controversy seemed to follow him everywhere. In 2002 in Berlin, he shocked the world when he dangled baby Blanket over a hotel balcony to show him to cheering fans below. What he thought was playful quickly turned into a scandal that reinforced the image of a man unraveling. By the early 2000s, Michael was drowning in debt. His lavish lifestyle and mounting legal fees pushed his finances into crisis. Estimates put his debt at over $300 million. Then came another blow. In 2003, British journalist Martin Bashir released Living with Michael Jackson. For 8 months, he followed Michael through Neverland, shopping trips and private moments. The documentary was presented as candid, but it became damning. In one scene, Michael admitted he sometimes shared his bedroom with children. He insisted it was innocent, just sleepovers, but the world heard something else. Months later, Santa Barbara prosecutors charged him with child molestation. The trial began in 2005. For months, Michael walked into court flanked by fans, dressed in military-style jackets, sometimes carrying an umbrella against the flashbulbs. The prosecution painted him as a predator. The defense argued he was the target of extortion. Former employees testified against him. Loyal fans camped outside, chanting his name. The world watched, transfixed. It was called the trial of the century. In June 2005, the jury delivered its verdict, not guilty on all counts. Michael wept. His fans erupted in relief, but it was a hollow victory. Legally innocent, but publicly scarred. Sponsors abandoned him. Radio stations pulled his music. His name, once synonymous with brilliance, was now shadowed by suspicion. By the mid-2000s, the King of Pop was a man in exile, financially strained, physically frail, and emotionally isolated. He had once moonwalked across the world. Now he was retreating from it. This is it, and the final curtain. By the mid-2000s, Michael Jackson was living in the shadows. His reputation was scarred, his finances strained, and his health fragile. The King of Pop, once the most celebrated man on earth, now felt like an exile. But in 2009, there was hope. Michael announced This Is It, a series of concerts in London meant to be both a comeback and a farewell. Originally planned as 10 shows, demand was so overwhelming that the number grew to 50. Tickets sold out in hours. For fans, it was a dream. Michael Jackson back on stage one last time. Rehearsals in Los Angeles showed flashes of his old brilliance. The footage later released in the documentary This Is It revealed a perfectionist still in command, adjusting lighting cues, fine-tuning choreography, pushing dancers to their limits. When the music played, he seemed ageless, but between takes he looked frail, exhausted. The same drive that made him a genius now demanded more than his body could give. Behind the scenes, he struggled with insomnia. To sleep, his doctor Conrad Murray administered powerful sedatives, including propofol, a drug normally reserved for hospital operating rooms. Michael called it his milk. It was dangerous. It was his only escape. On June 25, 2009, the world stopped. News broke that Michael Jackson had collapsed at his home in Los Angeles. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital. Within hours, it was confirmed. He was gone, 50 years old. The official cause of death? Acute propofol intoxication. In 2011, Dr. Conrad Murray was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter for his role in Michael's death. The verdict confirmed what fans already believed. Negligence had killed their idol. Shockwaves rippled across the globe. News websites crashed under the weight of traffic. Twitter and Google saw record-breaking spikes in searches. From Los Angeles to Tokyo, Paris to Rio, millions poured into the streets to mourn. On July 7th, his memorial at the Staples Center in Los Angeles was broadcast worldwide. More than 2.5 billion people watched. the largest audience in television history. Celebrities, world leaders, and family members paid tribute. His daughter, Paris, only 11 years old, broke down as she whispered, "Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine." In death, Michael's music soared again. Sales of his albums skyrocketed. His estate, once drowning in debt, began generating hundreds of millions each year. He became once more the highest-earning entertainer in the world, even in the grave. But beyond the numbers, it was clear. The world hadn't just lost a pop star. It had lost a symbol, an innovator, a cultural force. Michael Jackson's final curtain fell not on stage, but in tragedy. Yet in the echo of applause, in the moonwalk and the glove, in the sound of Billie Jean, his magic never really left. Legacy and controversy after death. When Michael Jackson died in 2009, the world didn't just mourn a superstar, it confronted a paradox. He was a genius who changed music forever, and a man whose life remained clouded by controversy. In the years that followed, his influence only grew clearer. Artists across genres, from Beyoncé and Usher to Bruno Mars, The Weeknd, and BTS, cited Michael as their blueprint. His dance moves became universal language. His music videos set the standard for spectacle. Even in death, he was still teaching the world how to perform. Financially, his estate turned from crisis to empire. Once drowning in debt, it became one of the most profitable in entertainment. Posthumous releases, Cirque du Soleil shows, and reissues of Thriller kept his legacy alive. Michael Jackson was gone, but his name remained a brand worth hundreds of millions each year. And yet the shadows followed. In 2019, the documentary Leaving Neverland reignited the debate. Wade Robson and James Safechuck, men who had once defended Michael in court, now claimed they had been abused. The film was graphic, emotional, and polarizing. Some viewers saw it as undeniable. Others saw it as opportunistic. Radio stations in some countries briefly pulled his songs, but fans mobilized in his defense, flooding social media with tributes, arguing that the art should not be erased. Concert arenas still echoed with his music. Young dancers still practiced the moonwalk in front of mirrors. Michael Jackson's legacy remains unresolved. To some, he is the king of pop, the man who broke racial barriers, reinvented music videos, and gave the world timeless songs. To others, he is forever tainted by allegations that refuse to fade. The truth is complicated, and maybe it always will be, but one fact is undeniable. No matter the scandal, no matter the shadow, Michael Jackson changed music and culture in ways no one else has. His story is both triumph and tragedy. His crown was heavy, his life was fractured, but his art remains immortal. Michael Jackson didn't just make history, he became it.